programs and fellow Trekkies. My name is Ian Abraxas, and welcome to part 4 of my Star Trek Antagonists tier list. We are going over the various villains and antagonists, because not all antagonists are villains, in the Star Trek mythos, ranging from TOS all the way to New Trek and its many iterations. Once again, I will reiterate that this video is sponsored by a friend of mine, Night Halcyon. He paid me to do this video, so shout out to you. This is our standing tier list so far. The rules are as follows. I do not judge a single species or race. It is merely by the character, and it's my opinion, strictly my opinion. Also, pretty much, I don't adjust the rankings per character. I put them in that tier, and that's where they stay as ordered. So no one's better or other. I'm leaving that personal opinion to the comment sections. So we are now at Voyager, Star Trek Voyager. And during its 7-year run, it certainly had its fair share of memorable antagonists and villains, for better or for worse. This isn't going to be like the DS9 one, where it was very heavily... I tried my best to be fair as possible, and I almost thought I'd get all S tier with them A tier, but I actually managed to find a few B tiers. Voyager, I think it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. So we're going to start off with one of the initial reoccurring villains / antagonists in Star Trek Voyager, Maj Kala from the Kazon Nistrum. The Kazon were the first initial antagonists that Voyager encountered in the Delta Quadrant. Technologically backward. They didn't understand, they didn't have replicator technology. And we later found out that a lot of their ships and technology came from the Trabe, which they overthrew. The Trabe used them as a workforce. They didn't appreciate that, and then overthrew it and took a lot of their technology. We also find out that the Kazon are apparently very misogynistic, do not like taking orders from women. And since Captain Janeway is a woman, that put a lot of the male Kazon off. So, yeah. How do I rate Maj Kala as a villain? So, for starters, he is a dick. First and foremost, he's a dick. Once a coming up villain we'll talk about, Seska, joins the Kazon, he actively tries to take over Voyager. They do have a small get-together with the other tribes, clans of the Kazon with the Trabe to kind of settle all disputes. Turns out the Trabe traded. That's again where we meet Maj. So we get a taste of what he's like there. And then we see him again, I think maybe once or twice before the two-parter Basics, where the Kazon are successful in taking over Voyager and stranding the crew on a barely M-class planet. So he's one of the few antagonists that succeeds for a second. Thanks to, again, another antagonist we're going to talk about. Weird how these all tie together. He ends up losing, and he flees, and then we never see the Kazon again. After that two-parter, the Kazon are gone and never mentioned. They're just poof. We've moved on from their territory, and we continue on, and they're perish of thought. So how do I rate Maj Kala as a villain? The Kazon, I feel like, weren't that even good of a antagonist to begin with. Because the concept was interesting that they weren't as technologically apt as Voyager or other members of the Delta Quadrant or species of the Delta Quadrant that we see. Like, they didn't have transporters, they didn't have replicators. They just had these ships that were powerful. That seemed to be it. Again, do I rate a species? Again, I'm not trying to rate a species based or judge a species based on their cultures, but again, the misogyny was very upfront, and it's just kind of like, okay, this is fun. But he, again, when he captured Voyager and beamed the, or transported the crew down, he essentially said, this is what's fair for the crew that wouldn't share their technology. I get you'd be kind of spiteful, but I don't know. Honestly, Maj Kala, I think as a character, like, yeah, he did succeed for half a second. C. Like, I almost want to put him in D because there's nothing like redeeming, but there's also nothing like, he's not as fun. Like, he's definitely not Gul Dukat. He's definitely not Khan, but he's also not Lore. He's not any of these other reoccurring characters. He's not like and he only had staying power, I think, within the first 2-3 seasons. I think is when season 2 into 3 was the 2-parter. So after season 3 began, the Kazon were gone and just he's gone. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and put him in C. That's where he is, but I think he should be grateful because, man, I almost want to put him in D, but I think he just barely comes up because he succeeded. He did for a brief second. But he wouldn't have succeeded without our next villain. Seska, the Cardassian secret agent, operative that infiltrated the Maquis as a Bajoran, was vocal in her opposition of Janeway, was apparently a lover to Chakotay, and then when it revealed that she had tried to smuggle technology to the Kazon, it was revealed that she wasn't Bajoran, she was Cardassian, which again, she tried to play the part, but then she's like, we should join the Kazon, they're more powerful, and it's like, are they? I don't think they are, but sure. And so she leaves Voyager, joins the Kazon. She gets messages from a fellow Maquis, which the Maquis had a standing of like really not liking the Cardassians. So the fact that a fellow Maquis was even contemplating, again, I have issues with Voyager and some of how characters were written, so we're not going to get into that. But again, got these messages. She captures Chakotay, takes hold of his DNA to impregnate herself. Okay, sure. And then helps the Kazon, Nystrom, take over Voyager. She believes that where she's pregnant, it is believed that she's carrying Chakotay's baby. The doctor reveals, nope, you're carrying Maj Kala's baby, which she kind of looks disappointed and like, oh, great. She constantly countermands Kala, which he is very annoyed by. She ends up dying when Voyager is retaken. Kala makes off with the baby, and that's it for Seska. She does pop up a couple times. A holographic version comes back, where she plays Havoc in that holographic scenario. And then she also appears when Voyager splintered into different eras of itself. And she appears in Engineering and her Cardassian guys. So she had staying power. I do think she was a better villain than Maj Kala. Not by much. I do think it was interesting that we actually got a Cardassian. It was weird that her features weren't more pronounced. They came back gradually. But again, I don't know. I'm not a big Seska fan. Like, as a character, she is a much better character and a better villain, I do believe, because for the longest time there was this duplicitous crew member among the crew, but once it was out in the open, it was incredible that I just find it weird that a Maquis would trust Seska. So, but I'm going to give her a B just because, again, whenever she showed up, there was trouble and it was enjoyable to watch. So I would say she's a much better character. Good, not great, but better than our C tier characters. Next up, on our tier list, speaking of Maquis, Lone Suitor. I had to talk about him. Because the impact he had, and it's very relevant to these first two. Lone Suitor was a Maquis who, and is a Beta Z. It wasn't revealed if he was telepathic or not, but he was a Beta Z who liked killing. He liked killing a lot. In the episode Meld, where it's revealed that his holographic simulations weren't working, he was apparently also trying some therapeutic stuff that, again, wasn't taking hold. He had killed a crew member, and he was arrested by Tuvok, who then melded with him to try and suppress it, or at least figure out how he ticked. And Tuvok ended up gaining his, or like kind of gaining his little love for violence. So he had an impact on Tuvok and the crew. And then in the two-parter Basics, where the Kazon took over, Suitor helped retake the crew, or retake the ship. And he went down like a hero. He helped, manage to rescue the ship, but he lost his life in the process. It was interesting just because, again, you had that moral ambiguity of how do you deal with him? Because he is a serial killer. We're not sure if he'll reform, and you're stranded, 70,000 light years. So he's just going to get locked away and take up the ship's resources. Yes. So, but he proved to be a valuable asset. Again, I think he's a solid B tier character because he is very well written. And, God, I had the name. He's a very, I have to look him up real quick. I have to look him up. I'm so sorry. Brad Dourif. Famous for the Child's Play as the serial killer Chucky. Charles Lee Ray. So seeing him in Star Trek was very much like, okay, hi, there you are. But he plays him wonderfully, which I think adds to the character. He's played by this, typical, like, he's a horror actor, and he plays him very well. And there's off-putting about him. So I do think he's a good character. Not great, because again, he's only in 3 episodes. His introduction episode, and then the two-parter where he does redeem himself and dies. But I do think the impact he had on the crew and the show itself has staying power. So I do think he's a good character. So as an antagonist, I do give him B. Just because, again, he does redeem himself, so he's not much of an antagonist. But still, what he did to Tuvok, I do think grants him at least a mention on this list and a ranking. I think it does warrant him being ranked on this list. Next up, another good episode in Star Trek Voyager, The Thaw. The Clown. The holographic simulation where members of the species went into hibernation and their minds were linked up to a computer, and it was supposed to be like this calming simulation. Well, turns out that went wrong and produced this guy who tortured and got his jollies from torture and fear, and was claimed to be fear incarnate. So when 2 members of the crew went in and realized, that didn't go well. It wasn't until Captain Janeway tricked him and made him believe that he himself was afraid. And Janeway had the holographic version of Janeway had this wonderful speech about how fear is meant to be conquered. That is your desire, one desire. And I love that whole episode, because again, wow, computers, you really shouldn't trust them, especially artificial intelligence. Really shouldn't trust it. I think this might be Voyager's first A rank character, just because he plays the role of the clown beautifully, and the character is great. He's terrifying. You don't know what he's going to do. The trauma he puts Harry through, the fact that he actually kills people in the simulation and it scares the person to death, literally, is kind of terrifying. Very Freddy Krueger-esque in a way. So I do think he deserves an A rank, just because it is a great character. Not S tier, but still a great character nonetheless, and a great episode. Highly recommend it. Next up, tech billionaire Henry Starling, CEO of ChronoWorks. How did he make his millions? Future tech. From 29th century starship that crash landed, he happened to be there, and the whole reason we have computers, or the whole computer boom of the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, were because he found a crashed 29th century ship, stranded its pilot, and used its technology to give us modern computers. He almost wiped out the entire solar system by trying to travel to the future to get more technology, until Voyager just stopped him and destroyed him and set the timeline right. So what became of Henry Starling, actually, we don't know. Because supposedly the timeline reset itself and either ChronoWorks still existed just to a smaller degree or not. But in the two-parter Times Arrow, where we meet Henry Starling, it's interesting to watch a 20th century man who has used this technology, got accustomed to it, and used it to a certain degree, who was not afraid of killing people. He was unscrupulous, did not care. He claimed he was trying to better humanity. He is definitely a peek into what tech bros would become. I genuinely believe he is we in the 90s we had the CEOs that were kind of like all they are but tech startups, but he absolutely could be a stand-in for certain tech bros or tech CEOs of today's age. Now, as a character and as a villain, I do think he actually also is A rank, just because the threat he posed, he didn't care. But it's interesting to watch a man from essentially our time deal with this technology and I guess not see how better he'd do. Like, he had a picture of him shaking hands with Richard Nixon. That should probably say quite a bit about him. Like, I'm not going to get into that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. But I think just Times Arrow and watching the whole thing play out, and just the fact that he's like, yeah, I can pilot it. The audacity and the confidence and the ego of this man who is like, I can pilot a 29th century ship into the 29th century and get more technology. I do not see a flaw in this. I can do this. And it turns out, as we learned in the first part, no, couldn't. He ended up destroying the entire solar system. So, yeah. But yeah, I gotta give him an A rank just because I do enjoy watching this tech bro, especially from today's standpoint, knowing how some of these tech bros are. And it's like, yeah. Even in the 90s, we kind of had you pegged. Next up on our list, I have no segue for this character, but Anorex of the Krenim Imperium. Hell's Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, which I genuinely wish we had gotten the whole season arc of Year of Hell, but we did get a two-parter, and Anorex was in command of a time ship, and he was attempting to essentially bring back his wife that had been lost after he initially wiped out. The whole purpose of this time ship was to wipe out the Krenim Imperium's enemies, and it would erase them from history as if they never existed. Well, the first time he did that, he didn't take into some calculations how history would affect, and it essentially wiped out his wife and the colony he was from. And then he began this journey of attempting to restore his wife and the Krenim Imperium to where it began, or to the might of its power, and essentially would target Voyager after Voyager's temporal shields started becoming kind of a nuisance in his plan. The character is driven. Hearing him talk, he is a sophisticated man. He is intelligent, and he's broken. And he's just trying to put right what he did wrong, which, again, anyone in his shoes would probably do the same. But at the same time, the length he was going to, that's kind of where it's like, you kind of lost us. But again, he is probably one of the few sympathetic villains we have on the list. and I genuinely feel for him. And as we see at the end of the episode, history has been restored completely before the time ship was created. He's back with his wife, and all is moved on, which I'm just going to say it right now. His whole arc between the 2 episodes and him as a character, I think gives us our first Voyager S-tier villain. The Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, just seeing how broken Voyager gets, how driven Janeway is to put things right. And then, of course, yeah, we get the traditional Star Trek. History's wiped clean. We start over. Everything's fine. But just as a character alone, I do believe Anorax is one of the best Star Trek characters, best Star Trek villains, definitely one of Voyager's strongest. So he absolutely is an S-tier antagonist / villain. Next up on our list, and actually our last Voyager villain, because I will say we talked about the Borg Queen already with Next Gen, and I've made my thoughts clear on that. So we're not going to talk about the Borg Queen here now. Captain Ransom of the USS Equinox, seen in the Equinox 2-parter. I believe it was a season 6 into season 7 2-parter. I believe might have been 5 into 6. It was a cliffhanger. So his crew and ship were also brought into the Delta Quadrant. I believe before Voyager, might have been after. I can't remember. But things did not go well for the Equinox. Right out the gate, his ship was severely damaged when they tried to cross through a territory that did not like him intruding. They were badly damaged. They kept running into problems, lost half his crew. His ship was severely damaged. They met a species that showed them their gods that blessed them goodwill. Well, things were going so bad that they decided to throw the rule book out the door and took it upon themselves to capture these aliens and use them for fuel, which propelled them faster through Borg space, through danger, and it actually caught up to Voyager in its journey. But because the methods were not so Starfleet, Janeway had a problem with it, and once it was discovered, it actually led to some firefights. We found out that Captain Ransom had disabled or deleted his EMH's ethical code, which that's not good. That's not dead. That's completely the fact that could happen. That's not good. But he does redeem himself at the end. His first officer and several of the crew declare mutiny and are killed off. The alien species attack, and he takes Equinox away, beams the survivor, his last few surviving crew members over to Voyager, and sacrifices himself in the end. I like this character. I liked the idea of what Equinox was, and Randy Ransom? No, I don't think it was Olivia. I know it was Captain Ransom. I forget his first name. But he was, as Janeway put it, had an illustrious career. He made first contact and several scientific discoveries. But then we see how far he had fallen in Equinox. And when they were aboard, it was interesting that you kind of saw that we can't trust them because they've still to go by the book. We don't. So it's very interesting to see a fellow like this isn't a bad world. This is a captain who is broken. He's fallen, which we had seen every now and then in Star Trek, every once in a while. But he definitely stood out to me just because of how it affected Janeway, for good or for worse. And I'm just going to have to. I honestly. I'm torn here. Like, he rides the line between S and A for me. I think I'm going to have to give him an A. Not quite S, but no. I do feel like he deserves an S rank just because for how far he pushed Janeway. Like, she relieved Chakotay of duty because he realized how far Janeway was willing to go to bring him in, which he recognized was almost close to obsession. Straight up relieves him of duty, which is like red flag. And Janeway straight up was willing to sacrifice a captured Equinox crew member, which again was very like you saw the impact he had on her So yeah, I think I got to give him an S rank just because of how far, similar to how Eddington pushed Cisco, Ransom had the same effect, except he was a fellow captain and a respected captain at that. And this was the effect he had on her when he quoted a regulation that said, in times of need, a captain must do to save his crew. I don't think the book took into account what he did, but he interpreted as any captain would. Yeah, well, I say any captain. Somebody would. He had to trust his gut and go with it. So in many ways, he's another tragic villain or antagonist, but it very much is that I can look at it and go, I get it. I get it. Wouldn't do what you did, but I understand why you did it. And I genuinely think because he's a sympathetic and almost empathetic villain or character, I have to give him an S rank. I have to. So yeah, I'm sure I've left off some people on this list. I'm sure I have, and that's fine, or at least in the Voyager antagonists. But next up, we do have the Enterprise list, so I hope you stick around and watch that. That'll be coming up soon. I'm very much looking forward to that because the Enterprise villains definitely were. But as again, like I said in my show tier list, Voyager, I feel like had a lot of missed opportunities. They went the safer route. They didn't have overarching. They had the occasional overarching theme and whatnot, but nothing as broad as what DS9 did. And a lot of people said it was TNG light. I kind of feel that way. I'm one of those people, but Voyager had some great characters, some not so great characters, but I do feel like I feel like I said the Borg Queen was a TNG movie villain first, so I talked about her there. Yes, she did have an impact on Voyager, but I've already talked about that in the TNG video. So if you've missed that discussion, go back and watch that video where I discussed the Borg Queen and why she is where she is. As one of my friends put it, I apparently did her dirty. So by all means, go ahead in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are. If you like the video, I'd appreciate if you leave a like. And if you really like the video or would like to see more, hit subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified when I upload my next video or when I go live. I stream 3 days a week. I love to entertain people, and I hope you found this video entertaining. I only want to stir up some spark some discourse. Civil discourse. But yeah. As we say at the end of every video, I shall see you all next cycle. This is Zayun, out.